What if I told you that some of the biggest damage in your life is not happening in years, not in months, not even in hours, but in 3 seconds? 3 seconds. That's all it takes for your brain to kill an idea, delay a dream, ruin momentum, and push you back into the same old life. You think you're making choices, but most of the time, those first 3 seconds are making them for you. And the worst part is, your brain doesn't sound like an enemy when it does it. It sounds reasonable. It sounds protective. It sounds smart. It tells you to wait, to slow down, to be careful, to not embarrass yourself, to not take the risk, to not start yet. But what if that voice is lying to you? What if the biggest trap in your life is not failure, but the tiny mental pause where your brain convinces you that comfort is wisdom? Stay with me, because once you see this trap clearly, you will start catching it everywhere. And when you do, you might never look at your own hesitation the same way again. Let's get straight into it. Your brain is not always trying to make you successful. A lot of the time, it is trying to make you safe. But here is the problem. Safe and successful are not the same thing. Safe usually means familiar. Safe means stay where you are. Safe means don't take the shot, don't post the video, don't speak up, don't send the message, don't ask the question, don't apply for the opportunity, don't get out of bed, don't start the thing that could change your life. And because your brain's job is to protect you from discomfort, it often treats growth like danger. That's the lie. That's the trap. And that's why so many people stay stuck, not because they lack potential, but because their own mind keeps hitting the brakes in the first 3 seconds. Think about how this works in real life. You decide you're finally going to change. You're going to wake up early, work on your goal, learn that skill, fix your habits, get your life together. And then the moment comes. The exact moment where action should begin. And right there, in those first few seconds, your brain steps in. Not today. You're tired. Start tomorrow. This isn't the right time. You need a better plan first. You should wait until you feel ready. And just like that, the energy is gone. The moment is gone. The promise is broken. And what is scary is how normal this has become. People think the danger is failing after they start. No, most people never even get that far. They get defeated in the first 3 seconds. That is why I call it the 3-second trap. Because the trap is not always dramatic. It is tiny, fast, invisible. It happens before the world sees anything. Before success or failure. Before effort or result. It happens in that microscopic space between intention and action. And if you lose in that space again and again, you can lose years of your life while looking completely normal on the outside. Now here is where it gets even deeper. Your brain does not lie to you with obvious nonsense. It lies to you in a voice you trust. It does not say, ruin your future. It says, rest a little more. It does not say, stay average. It says, be realistic. It does not say, hide because you're afraid. It says, wait until you're more prepared. It does not say, procrastinate. It says, think about it a little longer. That is why this trap is so dangerous. Fear shows up wearing the mask of logic. Laziness shows up dressed like self-care. Avoidance shows up pretending to be wisdom. And if you do not learn to separate truth from mental survival instincts, you will keep calling self-sabotage maturity. And let me tell you something that may hit hard. A lot of people are not stuck because they are lazy. They are stuck because they believe the first story their brain tells them. That is it. They obey the first excuse. They trust the first emotion. They surrender to the first wave of resistance. And over time, that becomes a life pattern. Not because they want failure, but because they never learned that the first voice in the mind is often not the truth. It is just the oldest fear speaking first. This is why you can know exactly what to do and still not do it. You can watch motivational videos, read books, make plans, buy courses, write goals, dream big, and still go nowhere. Because information is not the main problem. The real problem is that when the moment of action comes, your brain launches a lie faster than your discipline can respond. That is why people say they want a better life and then spend another night scrolling. That is why they say they want to get fit and then skip one workout, then another, then another. That is why they say they want freedom and then keep choosing short-term comfort over long-term power. It is not always lack of desire. It is lack of control over those first 3 seconds. And I want you to notice something important here. The lie is rarely huge. It is usually small. It sounds harmless. Just 5 more minutes. Just 1 more video. Just start next week. Just wait until you have more confidence. Just think about it later. Small lies, massive consequences, because your life is not only shaped by the big decisions you remember, it is shaped by the tiny decisions you barely notice. The decision to get up or stay down, to begin or delay, to act or overthink, to move or freeze. Those tiny moments stack, and when they stack for long enough, they become your identity. That is how someone starts saying things like, "I'm just a procrastinator. I'm just inconsistent. I'm just not disciplined." No, that is not who you are. That is what you have practiced. And what you practice, you become. If you practice hesitation every day, hesitation starts feeling like personality. If you practice delay every day, delay starts feeling natural. If you practice obeying fear every day, fear starts feeling wise. But that does not mean it is the truth. It just means repetition made it familiar. And familiarity is powerful. Your brain loves familiar, even if familiar is frustrating, even if familiar is miserable, even if familiar is keeping you broke, distracted, unhealthy, unseen, and unfulfilled. Why? Because familiar feels safe. This is why people stay in bad routines, bad relationships, bad self-image, bad habits, bad patterns. Not always because they enjoy them, but because the brain would rather keep a known pain than face an unknown challenge. That is why growth feels strange. That is why change feels scary. That is why the very things that could save you often feel uncomfortable in the beginning. So when you feel resistance, that does not automatically mean stop. That is one of the biggest mindset shifts you can make. Resistance is not always a warning. Sometimes it is a doorway. Sometimes it is proof that you are touching a part of life that could actually change you. Sometimes the reason you feel fear is not because the move is wrong, but because the move matters. Think about the last few times you almost did something important. Maybe you almost started your channel. Maybe you almost posted your work. Maybe you almost had the hard conversation. Maybe you almost invested in yourself. Maybe you almost took your habits seriously. Maybe you almost applied for the thing you secretly wanted. What stopped you? Was it a real wall? Or was it a 3-second lie? A whisper? A hesitation? A burst of doubt? A feeling that said, "Not now." And be honest, how many times has "not now" secretly meant "not ever"? That is the real cost of this trap. It does not just steal action. It steals self-trust. Because every time you tell yourself you will do something and then you let the first excuse win, a part of you stops believing your own words. You say tomorrow comes, and you break the promise. You say next week comes, and you disappear again. You say this time I'm serious. Then the first discomfort arrives and you fold. After a while, the problem is not just lost time. The deeper problem is that your mind no longer trusts you. And when self-trust is broken, everything becomes harder. Confidence becomes harder. Discipline becomes harder. Consistency becomes harder. Because deep down, you know you have been abandoning yourself in tiny moments for years. This is why the 3-second trap is not a small issue. It is not just about productivity. It affects your whole life. It affects your money because most people know they should save, build, learn, and improve. But in the moment, comfort talks louder. It affects your body because health is built in moments where you either obey the excuse or ignore it. It affects your relationships because honesty and vulnerability often die in those first seconds of fear. It affects your confidence because confidence is not built by thinking about action. It is built by taking action before your fear can finish its speech. And the most painful part is this. The brain rewards the lie immediately. That is why the trap works so well. When you obey the excuse, you feel relief. You feel comfort. You feel temporary peace. You do not have to face the hard thing right now. But the bill comes later. Later in guilt. Later in regret. Later in another day gone. Later in watching other people move while you stay the same. Later in realizing that your life was not destroyed by one giant mistake. It was weakened by thousands of tiny surrenders. But here is the good news, and this is where everything can begin to change. If the trap happens fast, the escape can happen fast too. You do not have to fix your entire life today. You do not have to become fearless overnight. You do not need some perfect routine, perfect motivation, perfect plan, or perfect mindset. You just need to become aware enough to catch the lie before it controls you. That is the game. Catch the lie. Catch it early. Catch it in real time. The moment your brain says later, notice it. The moment it says you are not ready, challenge it. The moment it says this will be uncomfortable, remind yourself that discomfort is often the price of growth, not the proof that you should quit. The moment it says you might fail, remember that doing nothing is also a failure, just a slower and quieter one. This is what strong people do differently. They do not have magical brains. They are not free from fear. They are not always motivated. They do not always feel ready. They simply stopped worshiping every thought they have. That is power. They learned that just because the mind says something first does not mean it deserves obedience. They treat thoughts like suggestions, not commands. They feel fear, but they move. They feel doubt, but they begin. They feel resistance, but they do not hand it authority. And once you start doing this, something incredible happens. You begin collecting proof that the lie is weak. You start the task you were avoiding, and you realize it was not as hard as your mind made it seem. You make the call, and the world does not end. You post the content, and you survive judgment. You start the workout, and the hardest part was just beginning. Again and again, reality becomes smaller than the fear your brain created in the first 3 seconds. And that is how you start taking your power back. Because the truth is, the lie is strongest before action. Not after. Before. Before the workout. Before the video. Before the conversation. Before the application. Before the first step. Once you move, the spell weakens. Once you begin, the brain loses some of its dramatic power. That is why starting matters so much. Starting is not just progress. Starting is rebellion. Starting is you telling fear, you do not get to drive anymore. So if you have been feeling stuck lately, maybe stop calling yourself lazy. Maybe that label is too simple. Maybe what is really happening is that your brain has trained you to retreat in the first 3 seconds, and you have mistaken that pattern for your identity. Maybe you are not broken. Maybe you are just conditioned. And if you are conditioned, you can be retrained. But retraining begins with honesty. You have to stop pretending the trap is harmless. You have to stop saying, it's just one delay, it's just one excuse, it's just one missed day. That is exactly how lives drift. One missed day becomes a pattern. One excuse becomes a mindset. One delay becomes a year. And then people look up and wonder why they feel disconnected from the life they wanted. It is because they kept letting 3 seconds make decisions that should have belonged to their future. So from now on, I want you to see those first 3 seconds as a test. Not a verdict. A test. When the resistance hits, that is the moment. When the excuse forms, that is the moment. When comfort starts negotiating with your future, that is the moment. That is where the real battle is. Not in some dramatic life event. Right there, quietly, in your room, in your mind. In the tiny instant where you either obey the old pattern or break it. And breaking it will feel unnatural at first. Good. That means you are interrupting the automatic version of yourself. That means you are finally doing something your old wiring does not like. That means change is no longer theoretical. It is happening. Strange does not mean wrong. Awkward does not mean impossible. Uncomfortable does not mean stop. Sometimes those feelings are simply signs that the old version of you is losing control. So the next time your brain lies to you, and it will, I want you to remember this. The first thought is not always the truth. The first feeling is not always wisdom. The first excuse is not always protection. Sometimes it is just fear trying to stay employed in your life. Sometimes it is just the trap. And the moment you recognize it, you create a gap between the lie and your response. Inside that gap is your freedom. That is where your new life starts. Not when the world changes. Not when your mood improves. Not when everything becomes easier. Your new life starts the moment you stop letting automatic fear make automatic decisions for you. It starts when you get up anyway. When you start anyway. When you speak anyway. When you try anyway. When you move before the excuse finishes talking. Because every time you beat the 3-second trap, you are doing more than completing a task. You are rebuilding trust with yourself. You are proving that your mind does not own you. You are proving that hesitation is not your master. You are proving that fear can speak without being obeyed. And that changes everything. So do not just watch this and move on. Do not let this become another video that gave you a temporary feeling and no permanent shift. If this hit you, prove it. Today, not tomorrow, today. Before this day ends, catch one lie and beat it. Do the thing you have been delaying. Start the thing you have been overthinking. Take one action before your brain can sell you another excuse. That one moment could become the beginning of a completely different life. And if you are serious, then make it real. Comment these words right now. I will not trust every thought. Type it like a promise to yourself, not to me. Subscribe if you want more videos that expose the hidden traps controlling your mind and teach you how to break them. And send this video to one person who keeps saying they are stuck because maybe they are not stuck at all. Maybe they are just losing in the first 3 seconds. And if they learn to win there, everything can change.